Let's learn in this video how to scale out the number of build agents in Azure DevOps. For that, we'll be using the Azure Virtual Machine Scale Set, VMSS, which is a resource in Azure that allows you to create a group of virtual machines and then scale out and scale in those VMs to go from 0 VM to 100 VM, for example, depending on the load that you need from your CI/CD pipelines. This is useful when you have multiple CI/CD pipelines that could run in parallel, or in your pipelines you have already jobs or stages that can run in parallel, and you want to really reduce the time needed by your pipelines to run. Using VMSS as a build agent could be a cost-effective solution because you pay only for what you use. If your pipelines needs to have 10 virtual machines to run your pipelines for 5 minutes, then you pay only for that consumption. And if later you don't need any VM, then that virtual machine scale set will scale down to 0 VM. And in that time, you are saving cost. Let's see in this demo in 2 steps how to create a virtual machine scale set in Azure, then use it in Azure DevOps pipelines. So first I'll go to the Azure portal, go to create a new resource, and for the resource I'll choose virtual machine scale set. For the creation of the virtual machine scale set, we need to provide some parameters like the subscription, the resource group that you want to use, the name of your virtual machine scale set, the region, whether or not you want to use the availability zone, and then the image. This is an interesting part because here you can use between Windows or Linux virtual machines. And if you want to have more options here, you can select another image. So from the Azure Marketplace, you will find multiple images available that you can choose from. I'll continue with the default Ubuntu server, and then you can even make some more savings with selecting Azure Spot Instance. For the size, you can use one of the sizes here, and of course there is more sizes available if you click on the link See All Sizes. I'll continue with the default size, then you can either choose to use password or SSH. I'll continue with the default settings. Then next here, there is the configurations for the disk, whether you want to use the premium SSD, standard SSD, and then you can select the networking. If you want to attach this VMSS into your private virtual network, for example, you can absolutely do that. And then for the scaling, this will define the default number of instances in your virtual machine scale set. By default, it's 2. I'll keep that by default. And then in the management, there is more options available for you to use from here, like enabling the automatic OS upgrades if you want to. Then health and advanced settings, I'll let you explore those different options, and for me I continue with those default configuration. So I'll go to click review and create. Once my template was validated, from here I go to select create. Because I've used it to use SSH keys, so here it is asking me to download the private key. So that's what Azure will do. It will download that, and then now Azure will proceed to create the virtual machine scale set for me. This will take a few minutes, so I'll come back later. Great, now the resource was created. I'll go to the resource in my Azure portal, and then from here I can go to the instances to see the virtual machines attached to this virtual machine scale set, and obviously here I can see 2 VMs already attached. From here, if I go to scaling, you will see that here by default it's set to manual scaling, so keep this in manual. This is important because it's not the VMSS who will decide itself how many VMs the Azure DevOps needs, but it's Azure DevOps who will decide on those number of VMs. So Azure DevOps will send a request to the VMSS to tell it, hey, please, now I need 10 VMs to run my pipelines. I need 0 VMs, so go to scale down, for example. So even if this initial count is set to 2 instances, later when we configure this with Azure DevOps, you will see that Azure DevOps will scale this up to or down to 0 if you want to. So let's go to do that. From the Azure DevOps organization here, I go to the organization settings, project settings. From here, open that in a new window. And from here, I have the agent pools under pipelines. And from here, you see that here we have the configuration for the Azure pipelines, my own hosted agent, and they have already a VMSS agent attached before doing this demo. And now I'll go to add another pool. So this pool could be either a self-hosted agent, maybe I'm using my own on-premise infrastructure, so this would be really useful for that use case. And then we have now this option saying I can attach an Azure virtual machine scale set. I select that option, and from here I need to connect to that VMSS from Azure. So for that, I need to specify my Azure subscription, select the right subscription and then authorize. And here I'll go to refresh to get the newly created scale sets. And yeah, here I see the VMSS that I have already created before. I'll select that and then I'll give it a name. I'll call it Azure DevOps VMSS. And then I have some other configurations here, like then I have a few interesting options, like to tear down the virtual machines after every use, the maximum number of the virtual machines in my scale set, and the number of agents to keep on standby. I click create, and now Azure DevOps is connecting to my Azure subscription, and from here you see it now could connect it to my VMSS. So if I select that here, I'll get actually more settings available. If I go to settings, here when you see the maximum number of VMs in the scale set, the number of agents to keep on standby, this is what we have configured earlier. Great, now if I go to agents, from here I should see the VMs shown here, but that's not the case, because now if I go back to my instances here, you see that now I have this icon saying this is not running the last model. So what I'm going to do here is that I'll go to upgrade those VMs. So clicking on each one of those, and then I'll go to click upgrade. Do that for the first VM, and then come back and do the same thing for the second VM from instances. Select the second VM, and the same do upgrade for that VM. Yes. So now Azure is upgrading those VMs. Let's wait a few seconds for that to finish. Once that's done, from here, if I go back to the settings, I can see the two VMs are shown here under agents. Now, how can I configure my pipelines to run on that virtual machine scale set build agent? So in the build section here, where we specify what is the machine we want to use for the build, we typically choose here with VM image, but to use the VMSS here, I'll just go to use the name of that VMSS that I have attached. So remember the name here was this one, Azure DevOps VMSS. That's the name of the VMSS in my Azure DevOps, not an Azure. So I'll use that as the name of my VMSS. Now I'll go to save and run my pipeline. And here you see we have now 4 jobs are waiting for the build agents to be available. Now Azure DevOps will ask the VMSS to create 4 instances of the VMs. If I go here to refresh, from here you can see those 4 instances are started creating. Basically, this will create a new virtual machines, so there is no cache from the old pipeline runnings, and each VM will run the script in order to install the build agent from Azure DevOps. So this will take few minutes to provision all of those VMs. Now the 4 VMs are available, so coming back to the agents, we'll see that there is 4 VMs that are available in Azure DevOps. Now the 4 jobs have run successfully, and if I dig into each one of those, you will find an initialized job that the first job have run it in the VM with 04, then the second job have run it on another VM that is dev 05, and the same for the third and fourth jobs, 07 and 06. Few minutes after the pipeline was run successfully, I can see here from the instances that now my VMs and my scale set have started to be deleted. And if I go to scaling, the VM scale set now is set to 0. So that was the demo for showing how VMSS could be used in Azure DevOps to provision multiple build agents depending on what we need to run our pipelines. For more details about configuring the virtual machine scale set in Azure DevOps, I would recommend to go check out this documentation from Azure DevOps, and then note that here you have also another option to run the build pipelines inside the Docker container. If you are looking for more content from me, go check out my YouTube channel, where here I post regularly more videos about DevOps, Azure, and Kubernetes. Thank you.